So I'm not going to dwell on the gap. The gap in standardized testing results between white and Asian American students on the one hand and black and Latino students on the other. But if you were to examine the data carefully, what you would see, but it's very interesting that most people don't observe, is that the size of the gap gets bigger and smaller over time. Over a period of 4 or 5 years, the gap will get steadily smaller, and then over the next 3 or 4 years, it'll get a little bit wider again. And these changes can be as much as 30 to 40% change in the size of the gap. And no one is sure exactly why that happens, but it gives you evidence that indeed these results are subject to improvement. But one thing you can say for sure is that percent proficient or above, even for white or Asian students, is abysmally low. I mean, we're looking at 40-something% of the students in this country who are white and Asian American performing at the level of proficiency or above. How could that be satisfactory for anybody? Now, the big question, of course, is in a school, if it's actually the students who do the work, not the teachers, the students are the one who have to learn. So the role of the school is primarily to motivate the student to want to learn. At least that's the way it works in my school, where I've been teaching for 40 years now. If I can motivate my students to want to learn, the rest of it's easy. But it's not so easy to figure out how to motivate them to learn because what motivates one student doesn't motivate another. So sometimes I hear a superintendent saying, I came into this school district and they were in a mess. They had 14 different reading programs in the schools. That was too complicated. Nobody could figure it out. Couldn't train the teachers. So I think about that to myself when I say, well, let's see, does that mean that each second grader was being asked to simultaneously read from 14 different systems? No, I don't think so. Each student only has one. Does it mean that each teacher had to master 14 different reading systems? No, I don't think so. Every teacher only has one. Does it mean that every school had to have 14 different reading programs? No, it's just one per school. So I guess what it means is that the superintendent's staff can't master 14 different systems. They'd rather have to master just one. But do you really think that the same one approach is going to motivate equally successfully the students in one school where 40% of the students come from 3 different African countries, 4 different Central American countries, Mexico, and are otherwise non-native English speakers, as well as in another school that has an 80% upper middle class, 2 parents at home, right-handed, blondes, no learning disabilities, native English speaker? Probably not. So think about it as an issue in motivation. I've got to make this machine work. It somehow is. I know I'm doing something wrong. One result has been charter schools. Charter schools are now approaching 2% of all students in the U.S. In Los Angeles, they now educate 7% of the students. In Dayton, Ohio, they educate about 30% of the students. In Detroit, in Washington, D.C., and in New Orleans, Louisiana, charter schools now educate approximately 50% of the students. There has been a strong backlash by teachers' unions because most charter schools are non-union, but not all of them. There has been the recent rise in popularity of an approach sometimes known as the thin contract, which was first initiated for the so-called pilot schools in Boston, which have a 3-page long teachers' union contract, and in fact gives tremendous flexibility to a principle that other schools in Boston do not enjoy. Green Dot charter schools in Los Angeles have a 7-page, but that's double-spaced, thin contract. So it's essentially the same as the 3-pager in Boston. Charter schools in every city that I have studied except Seattle were instrumental in starting the willingness of the school district and of the teachers union to consider real meaningful change, because they saw, number one, that small schools autonomously managed were better. They were better for the teachers who flocked from the school district to these schools. They were better for the students and their families who formed waiting lines to get into these schools. They were better for the results of the students. In our charter school in Los Angeles, one of them, our first graduating class was a year ago. 100% of our this school is 90% Latino, 10% African American, and approximately 90% low-income students. When they entered at 9th grade, they tested on the average in the 4th grade level on math and reading. When they graduated from our school last June, 100% of them passed the California high school exit exam, and 40% of them, and 90% of them are now in 4-year colleges. Okay. So we have existence proofs that populations of students that are difficult to reach are reachable, but a one-size solution won't do it. And charter schools have really made that case all over the country. Why haven't more people tried it? Of all the forms of education reform you can imagine, adopting new curricula, new teacher training programs, block scheduling, open classrooms, team teaching, looping, Waldorfing, whatever you want to imagine, the most difficult by far is decentralization. There is nothing that even approaches decentralization of a district in difficulty. However, if you're bigger than 150 teachers, there is no other solution that works. My conclusion is that if you do these other things, all of which are important, you're pouring new wine into old wineskins, into the same centralized top-down district in which teachers are restricted in their ability to use the new things they've learned, in which their need to have innovative approaches to curriculum design, scheduling, and selection of books and materials is restricted because the central office makes those decisions, in which their ability to continue their development of teachers through professional development is restricted because the central office controls 100% of the professional development money and makes them go to programs designed by somebody in the central office, which the teachers very rarely find to be useful. So it's not that all of those other things aren't of huge importance, they are. But it's to think about the issue, if we pour all of those investments into the same old structure, for what reason do we expect behavior of the teachers to change? Thank you. So total load, let's move on from this one. We already talked about total load. I'm just going to extract one point. This is the simplified result from this big, gigantic analysis that we did. Now, here's what I want to extract. Our analytical model says, give the principal control over more of her budget. She will make a variety of changes in the school, which I will about to describe. Those will result in a lower total student load, which will produce higher student achievement. And the summary is, the amount of gain you get in student achievement varies hugely from to another of our 8 districts, depending on the consistency with which the district has implemented the change. And it has been done most consistently in New York City by far. In New York City, for every 10 percentage points that you increase the principal's control, let's say from 10% of the budget controlled by the principal to 20%, student performance as measured by percent who are proficient or above goes up by 11 percentage points. It is an enormous gain. I have never seen any other measure that comes even close, even in the same neighborhood as that. It means that when you increase principals' control by 20 percentage points, percent proficient rises by 22 percentage points. Now, that's not equally true when you go all the way up to 80% principles control. You get an asymptotic effect, I think, as you get towards the top. I don't have a large enough sample to allow me to test that. Go to the next one, please.